Hello, today is Thursday, April 5th, 2018. I'm Joe Schmidt with TC2, and this is Staying Connected. I'm joined on today's podcast by my fellow TC2 project director, Tony Mangino. A few weeks ago, Tony and I ran a session at the Enterprise Connect show in Orlando, Florida, called SD-WAN, Catch the Next Wave of Cost Savings. The session included a panel discussion with some SD-WAN experts from AT&T, Masery, Verizon, and Vonage. So what we want to do on today's podcast is share with you what we covered and what we discovered in the session. Okay, Tony, how about if you give a summary of what we covered in the session?
Thanks, Joe. It really was a great opportunity to collaborate with some industry experts relative to the wave of SD-WAN deployments in the enterprise. The session covered a few key elements, and I just want to touch on those briefly and kind of give some summary feedback on the nature of those discussions. We talked about the nature of the hybridized WAN environment and some of the benefits of this transformation to an SD-WAN network. And really the discussion was around SD-WAN being both a revolutionary as well as an evolutionary WAN networking technology. We discussed some of the considerations around the SD-WAN infrastructure, particularly the flexibility and multimodal transport options, some of the considerations relative to the hardware and software solutions, and some of the challenges customers are grappling with when considering self-managed versus supplier-managed solutions. From there, the conversation sort of went into the area of use case adoption and some of the savings propositions. And really, all of the panelists keyed in on a few attributes relative to the SD-WAN solution, and those are rapid service delivery and time to market for spinning up a new location, the application performance and visibility attributes of an SD-WAN solution, the ability to push policies and configurations centrally out to the remote sites, as well as increased resiliency and security once you've got a fully enabled SD-WAN network in the field. We talked about some of the landscape for the suppliers and the marketplace for SD-WAN services, and really we keyed in on how dynamic the marketplace is and the various types of players that have jumped into the space, ranging from the traditional telco providers, legacy equipment providers. There are specific niche SD-WAN suppliers, and then you add in the service integrators and other kind of non-traditional providers that have jumped into the market. And then we sort of closed down the discussion talking about all the potential benefit and upside to SD-WAN solutions, but this, somewhat of a conundrum in terms of enterprise customers trying to feel their way around and identifying the appropriate pathway forward in order to begin a transition or a migration to an SD-WAN solution. And so we talked about, some of the business case considerations, various deployment models, and, had an interesting discussion from a sourcing and a procurement perspective. Technologies like SD-WAN, what impacts those may have on your existing contractual commitments to your incumbent suppliers.
I enjoyed moderating the session with you, and I thought that the panelists were great. They all had just really a solid understanding of SD-WAN and their respective companies' SD-WAN solutions. And what I found interesting is that in addition to SD-WAN, most of the guys, that they also had some responsibility for various virtualization initiatives, for hybrid WAN, and for managed services. So they had a pretty broad view of network services.
I couldn't agree more. It was really gratifying to hear their views on the benefits of SD-WAN and some of their frontline experience and guidance on what they've seen, enterprises do to help to support a successful introduction of SD-WAN into their production environments and some of the challenges that they've encountered as well. Just reading off of some of my notes here from the session, all of the panelists said the cost savings are an important driver for an SD-WAN deployment, but really not the only factor. And in some cases, the hard dollar costs were outweighed by the soft dollar benefit. Speed of provisioning was a concept or a notion that resonated through a lot of the panelists' comments. The ability to use wireless LTE, for example, as an access modality. This notion of zero-touch provisioning, right, and being able to spin up remote locations much faster than in a traditional wireline environment. Jeff Schaefer at AT&T actually mentioned the different options for deploying SD-WAN that best suit an enterprise risk tolerance, and that there are a couple different deployment models that should be considered when building your migration strategy. I think across the board, all of the panelists agree that SD-WAN provides much better end-to-end analytics as well as application performance metrics, and that generally, SD-WAN is much simpler to manage than the traditional WAN networking environment, but that's once it's up and running and you've got it tuned in and tested.
Yeah, we did sort of push them on that cost savings question because that's always a big driver for our clients. Regardless of the technology, it seems that our clients usually expect some savings from a new technology. I think all of the panelists, they did agree that savings can come in two forms. Hard savings and soft savings, and you just sort of touched on that. They said it's not the SD-WAN hardware where enterprises are going to save money. So replacing a router with an SD-WAN appliance, it's not going to move the savings needle. However, they did say that enterprises will save money on access. I think they all agree that it's true, as you pointed out, that you can use cheaper access. So, for example, using LTE wireless or broadband or dedicated internet as a replacement for some of your MPLS is going to save money. But I think it was Paul Rulis at Masery that pointed out that you can also achieve some really big savings by being able to use all of your connectivity in an active state. So rather than having this expensive primary connection, this MPLS connection that's maybe 60 to 80% utilized and then backed up by some circuit that's seldom used, you can configure it so that it's active. I think that active-passive configuration that I just mentioned, we actually see that a lot with our clients. So I truly believe that SD-WAN is going to change that design principle with most of our clients.
You're spot on there. I think one of the other observations that the panelists collectively agreed to was that this notion of soft dollar savings with an SD-WAN deployment is in the uptime and availability of the remote sites. So where you've got potentially a primary, secondary, and in some cases a tertiary connection to a single site, and those are using all different forms of underlying transport. If you've got a fiber cut that might take down your primary wireline connection, there's a much greater chance that that site is going to be able to survive an outage when you've got a broadband backup and perhaps an LTE tertiary connection. So it's that uptime and availability and resiliency really that was driving some of the soft dollar benefit in terms of not having to deal with as much outage and downtime.
I think it was interesting also that all of the panelists cautioned that it's not as easy as someone might think to start using an SD-WAN solution. Again, Paul at Masery said projects that don't work out well usually happen when a customer isn't sure about what they want. So they're not sure if they want a DIY solution, they want to build it themselves, manage it themselves, or if they want some managed solution that all four of the panelists offered. As you know, Tony, that's one of the things that we tell our clients when we help them define their SD-WAN strategy. You need to have a very clear understanding of what you want before you go to market to buy it.
Your point there about the DIY solution versus a managed solution was something that the panelists were interested in fleshing out a little further, and there was a lot of discussion around the sheer volume of headcount and FTEs needed to support an SD-WAN solution and the ability for an enterprise to reduce the headcount. And that it's not only a pure numbers game. I mean, we're talking about an opportunity to streamline your IT shop and reduce the number of expensive resources that have a very finite set skill set with a lower cost resource that is managing an SD-WAN dashboard versus having these highly trained, albeit expensive FTEs.
I think Paul at Masery also said enterprises, they still need to have responsibility for the IP addressing. Security, as you mentioned at the start, is critically important. And cloud connectivity. More and more of our clients need this direct connection to applications from Google and Amazon and Microsoft. So they need to really consider how they want to connect to those cloud services using an SD-WAN solution. I think it was Viraj Parekh at Verizon that pointed out enterprises, they really need to figure out how they want to segment their applications, and he did caution that you need to spend some time making sure that you don't overwhelm the centralized SD-WAN controller by adding too many sites too quickly. I think what he was saying was it's not a simple rip and replace and you're up and running, moving from some router-based environment to an SD-WAN environment. I think you just need to move at a reasonable pace when you start moving to an SD-WAN solution.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, almost all of our clients are either contemplating SD-WAN, currently assessing or piloting an SD-WAN deployment, or have already begun that migration to a hybridized and then to an SD-WAN environment. I'm sure SD-WAN is going to be like what we saw with SIP trunking. Both early adopters as well as fast followers are going to save a lot of money, but there are going to be issues to deal with along the way.
Yep, I agree. All right, it looks like we are out of time, so thanks, Tony, for taking time to review the session with me.
Thank you,
and
Joe.
If you, the listening audience, would like to learn more about SD-WAN, or maybe you want to discuss other network service or ICT lifecycle needs with Tony or me or any of our colleagues at TC2 or LB3, please give us a call or drop us an email. And you can also stay current by checking out our websites or follow us on LinkedIn.